Okay, biblical child training, part two, dealing with corporal punishment or the rod of correction, if you prefer. Um, Part of our confusion, I think, is that we have been taught by secularists that any kind of corporal punishment of a child constitutes child abuse. Um, that's a lie from the pit of hell because they want your child's soul to be destroyed because they're all of the devil anyway. I speak generically, just bear with me. But the bottom line is, if for the sake of reason and logic here, first off, if God says that's the right way to train a child, that's the right way to train a child. Obviously, we have to administer the rod of correction when it is, in fact, referring to corporal punishment in love. As Patrick pointed out before, that rod also speaks of authority. When we get a child under authority, you'd be amazed how few times we really have to punish them at all because they've come under a disciplined lifestyle to where they don't constantly need to be corrected in that way. They can be verbally corrected or other things. But anyway, all I want to drive at is the fact that a measured and an appropriate kind of corporal punishment, a spanking on the behind, not a punch in the face, is not only perfectly safe and perfectly healthy, but it is tremendously effective.
And I would like to reiterate if you do it, especially you do it out of love, you really don't have to do it that much. Now you may have a hard-headed kid that needs a little bit more training, a little more discipline. But my own personal experience, I can only remember maybe 2 or 3 times ever spanking my daughter. She took to it, she understood the intent, and she responded, and we went on with our training. But it was not a day in, day out, beat the crap out of the kid kind of a thing.
Amen. Yeah, so that's the biggest fallacy for young parents, especially if they weren't trained in a biblical fashion, or if corporal punishment was used but it was misused. A lot of times the reaction is to say, well, I would never abuse my child like I was abused. So they'll throw the baby, proverbially speaking, out with the bathwater and not want to even train their children at all. Of course, that's going to backfire terribly. And since we're talking primarily about the rod of correction and corporal punishment, I have to say, as I kind of left a while ago, it's extremely effective. So it's so effective that a good, properly applied spanking of the behind is so effective that you have to do, as Patrick already beat me to it, very few of those in the childhood training span of a child. Very few. Okay, very few. A handful or something like that is about all it usually amounts to. So we could talk about how do you apply. You could. Where I come from, the South, it was a belt. If you was at school, it was a board. And some people have shunned the idea of spanking with your hand. I'm not sure it matters all that much as long as you are controlled and you are not in anger or certainly in some kind of a retributional type mode when you would actually punish someone with corporal punishment. But either way you do it, the bottom line is if some pain is not inflicted or some shock doesn't happen that says, oh, they're serious about this and they will enforce what they have verbally stated or trained me to, then you've been terribly ineffective. And so whatever amount of force that requires, it's probably going to vary with every child and every circumstance. But you have to, all I'm saying is you obviously would have to use enough force that the point was made and some consequence is reaped for behavior. Because that's essentially what it's going to come down to is you do stupid things, it has to hurt. And if you do something that's rebellion and wrong, then it has to have a consequence, which is a pain on the butt, basically.
And if you haven't conveyed that idea, you have really put your child behind the eight ball, because when they get out into the real world, there are consequences. I don't care how hard, government or whoever tries to protect, bad things from happening, bad things are going to happen. And if you've learned that if you do certain things, there's these kind of consequences, so don't do those things, you've put your child way ahead of where they'd be if they didn't have that kind of thing.